talk us through some of the legislation and what's been done to simplify the documents and to the consumer's benefit?
Well, I think, there's a couple of things that have been done, not necessarily around only the documents. I mean, first of all the documents are now in English, and so, you've got a standard language of choice, which, may bring its challenges, but at least there's no sort of misinterpretation in the translation, which I think definitely does help. In addition to that, there's also part of the documentation are things like affordability assessments, proof of income, that, for now so you need to prove that you've had sustainable income for a period of time. It's not just 1 month salary slip, it's 3 months. It's 3 months of bank statements if you can't produce your salary slip. So the affordability assessment has now got bands of guidelines. So all of that incorporated in your document pack for the loan application also do help you kind of sit back and focus on, okay, what am I spending the money on? What is my free cash at the end of the month? I think the reality is that there are still some challenges in making sure that the information provided is authentic and realistic. And obviously that creates risks for the credit provider, so it's on both sides. It's on both sides of the scale.
So we spoke about the documents being in English. Should credit providers offer documents and support in every South African language, or is that a little bit too much to ask?
I think that would probably be a big ask. I think for most of them, certainly most store-based, retail-based, branch-based, where they have a on-the-ground network, just because of the geography, if you're going into a branch in a particular area, the chances are the staff in that area will speak the local language. So I think you are getting, access to it. It does present its challenges. I mean, more and more of this type of business is done telephonically. We have a call center doing that type of business. So you're not necessarily, you may be phoning somebody in Cape Town, but you're phoning from KZN, you're not necessarily Xhosa speaking, for example. So I think there are some challenges in that. But as I said to you at the outset, probably the better thing is that the standardization of the documentation in English, it means that nothing is lost in that, in that translation.
Now, if I'm in debt, if I'm in that debt cycle you were speaking about earlier, what are the steps I have to take to get out of that?
Well, I think the first step is to actually acknowledge the position you're in. It's like any negative event that happens in your life or that you're confronted with, you need to actually acknowledge it and you need to be prepared to do something about it. So I think that acknowledgement is the first step. I think the second step would be to gather all the information and make sure that you're realistic around documenting everybody that you owe money to and then creating a budget out of that. Once you've gone through the process of actually creating a budget, then again, the responsibility is on you to stick to that budget and start to actually show some responsibility in terms of your own financial affairs. And there could be some challenges in that, because sometimes when you actually sit down and you start to document all of that, you actually have a shortfall and you can't afford to meet all of the monthly commitments that you now have. And I think that's when you really need to start looking at seeking professional help to try and work out what would be the best thing for you to do. And the extreme of that is to be declared insolvent. But without a professional's guidance and a professional's help, as I said, just putting your head in the sand is not the solution.
It's not going to help.
It's not going to help. But those things are not going away, put it that way.
Talk me through your main points on what credit providers can do to help their consumers never get into this situation where they have to be declared insolvent and seek professional help, and they just kind of end up, I think, a little bit lost.
Yeah, I think there's a massive responsibility on the credit providers, and it's not an easy job for them, bearing in mind the number of credit providers and real onus on the consumer to be honest about their affairs when they're actually applying for additional credit or for credit, with this particular credit provider. But again, I think it might not necessarily be specific to, to their population of borrowers or potential borrowers, but really just to try and raise the levels of education, the levels of awareness, talk about responsible credit granting, focus on perhaps building an education program that is entered into the school system or to the, even the high school system would be a help. And if you think about the sponsorship of a game, that could potentially end up in a child winning a post school sort of education, what a fantastic thing, what an example. So I think that there's a lot that they can do that might not necessarily be focused on an immediate short-term win, but it will have a long-term benefit for the country as a whole.
Tracy, thank you for joining us and sharing that information.
Thank you for having me.